For more than a decade, Saturdays and Illegal Curve have been synonymous with one another. With insight, analysis, and interviews regarding the Winnipeg Jets, the Manitoba Moose, and all around the NHL, here are Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg, and your host, Drew Mindell. The Illegal Curve Hockey Show starts now.
Well, if the pre-show is any indicator, this one's going to be off the rails. Good morning, Winnipeg. Good morning, Manitoba. For all those joining us live this morning on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms, we say good morning, universe, and welcome to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. With Dave Minuk, with Ezra Ginsburg, I'm your host, Drew Mindell, here on this Saturday morning for the next couple of hours to talk about the Winnipeg Jets, talk about everything going on in the world of hockey as we do each and every Saturday morning. Gentlemen, first Illegal Curve Hockey Show of 2023. Great to see both of you this morning. I tuned in a little bit here and there on the post-game show last night. I was not on with you gentlemen, of course, but kudos to both of you on a job well done, and I say good morning to you both.
Good morning, boys. Yeah, I thought it was one of our best shows. I think it was, just less is more if you want to, use that. No, I'm just kidding, Drew. But yeah, first show of 2023, boys. 2023 so far feels a little bit different than 2022. I'm not sure exactly. I can't really put my finger on it, but something about me seems a little bit different than 2022. But I don't know. I guess it means that, there's good things to come.
A bit lesser than a bit less than you're at the end of 2022, right?
Yeah, just something feels a little bit different, but I haven't put my finger on it, but maybe we'll get into that later. But look, another huge Jets victory. And, you mentioned, Drew, you weren't on the post-game show, but we talked about it. It's like another one of those, like the recipe for the Jets, not a very good first period, get badly outshot for the first half of the game and then get timely scoring. And especially on the power play, 5-on-3, right? 2 goals with 2 extra men on the ice. Hellebuck was fantastic. And you look at this Jets team and, players like Ehlers and Wheeler, Perfetti, Schmidt. I mean, these guys, they're only going to get better. I mean, yesterday you saw, especially early on in the game, there was some, passes that were going off of sticks and the timing was a little bit off between Ehlers and Connor. But I mean, they're only going to get better with more action, and lucky for the Jets, they've got the Canucks. So, your B game has basically been enough to win against the Oilers and the Flames and the Lightning. The Canucks game was obviously, dominated by the Jets, but these last 3 games, guys, they've been, all tight games, but, the Jets are winning these games and they're finding ways to win. So even though I don't think, Rick Bowness is going to like the start to the game, I mean, you got the win against a really good team, even without Victor Hedman. Aside from Hedman, we talked about it, they were, relatively healthy compared to, what the Jets were a week ago. So look, it's been, last week was a very good week, and, the Jets continue to bank points. They continue to close the gap between, first place Dallas and themselves, and you've got Minnesota chasing you. So these are huge points, and, the schedule is going to get a little bit tougher next week. We know the Jets have struggled against the Eastern Conference, but, certainly against the West and in their own division, they've been excellent this year.
Well, after that soliloquy, I'll say good afternoon to Dave Minuk. Dave, good to see you on this Saturday. Talking, of course, about the Winnipeg Jets, but as he's not wrong in that the Jets, again, a slow start. We've talked about it. We talked about it on a number of the post-game shows when I was broadcasting from down south. Slow starts, but they get better as the game goes on. And that third period last night, first of all, that was a fun hockey game. I'm sure you guys touched on that during the post-game show, but it was, quite an entertaining game from a fan's perspective. Being in the crowd last night, I really enjoyed it. And I thought it was a good level of intensity, good level of hate, which is surprising for these two teams. But I think they each sort of realize where the other one stands in the hierarchy of NHL teams, Dave, that, the Jets are no longer surprising people. They're no longer a surprise team. You're no longer going to see the backup goaltender playing against the Jets by and large, like we saw early in the year, because the Jets are, towards the top of the Western Conference. And the Tampa Bay Lightning, well, you know who the Tampa Bay Lightning are. They're still the benchmark teams in this league. And you sort of felt that, I think, extra intensity, and you felt it grow as the game went on last night.
And I say good evening to everyone and welcome to the Illegal. Kidding, of course, Drew. Look, I mean, the Jets are the chat is excited. People are excited. The Jets are undefeated in 2023. And you're right. That is an important hockey game. And we touched on it last night. Very unusual to the amount of dislike between these two teams. And Ian Cole, after the game, was asked about it. And he said that the Jets are kind of known for being a chippy team. It's always funny when these narratives exist, right? As like remember Jets were big and fast and strong, which they've kind of gotten back to a little bit, but for a while they weren't. And yet everyone still referred to the Jets as big and fast and strong. So, it's funny how those things exist, but it seemed like Tampa must have come in with that mindset because the level of chippiness between the two teams was significant. And again, folks don't mind a tussle or two. So when they see the gloves get dropped, it's all adds for a little excitement and shows you that the points are important. And, we're approaching that midpoint of the season and the Jets are feeling good about themselves, right? And I touched on it last night, Drew. I don't know if you heard, but I said it's funny how like the Jets hit their 25th win of the season in game 39 and now last year it was game 57, which again some folks would say, well, last year, leave it in the past. I just think it's indicative of how much better this team is this year than they were last, which again, remember, running it back largely the same team is significant, right? Because it goes to show you what a difference some coaching can do for a club because of the fact that, I mean, again, most of the same crew and yet much better results. So significant, a big win for the Jets. And because I said to Ezzy, you kind of had a built-in excuse. You could have very easily said, well, we had 4 guys coming into the lineup, and Ez is 100% right. Like it was clear the timing wasn't there because you can, and as he said this last night, you can practice as much as you want. A practice isn't a game. And so once you get into a game where guys actually want to take your head off and not your teammates trying to play you hard, but not trying to hurt you, it's a big difference. And so Ehlers' timing wasn't there. Wheeler's timing, no. Perfetti, none of their timing was there. And yet, as Ed touched on, they had 5 Nate Schmidt had like 5 shots on net that missed, but he still had the shots. He still was in the right spot.
All slappers too, by the way.
Yeah, yeah. He released the Schmidt bomb. But the point is that you had that built-in excuse to say, well, we had all these new guys come into the lineup. I mean, we said this before. When do you ever remember having 4 players all come back into the lineup in one game? You just don't see it. And it was interesting that Rick Bowness chose to do it, especially against a tough opponent like Tampa. And eventually the Jets got their legs going, and I think it was a good thing for the Winnipeg Jets.
Yeah, look, I mean, it that third period, was a pretty good. I mean, it was a pretty impressive period for the Winnipeg Jets. Not so much even on the offensive side of things, but obviously they scored a goal and it turned out to be the game-winning goal. But it was as impressive in the way that they were able to neutralize Tampa Bay, I thought. Now, of course, there was a little bit of hairy moments there. Dylan DeMello sweeping the puck off the goal line there, a key moment. But late in the game, I mean, Kyle Connor all of a sudden becoming a goon, taking as many penalty minutes in last night's game as he took all of last year. But, that power play, the Jets, I'm sure you guys saw it on the Jets video. They released it on Twitter. Rick Bowness talking about the penalty kill and the job that the penalty kill did. And I think the Jets, to some extent, I don't want to say demoralized because that's probably too strong of a word, but for Morgan Barron to get that game-winning goal, or not the game-winning goal, but the empty net goal when he got it by just out-hustling Tampa Bay. That's all that was. That was just working harder than the Tampa Bay Lightning did on that play. I think they thought that it was just going to be a simple retrieval, get the puck, bring it back on the ice, and continue the 6-on-4. But Braden Point and our buddy Sean Reynolds of Sportsnet tweeted about it. Braden Point basically gave up on the play. He was upset that it, left the zone to begin with, and he just sort of lollygagged his way back, and it ended up costing the Lightning the opportunity to really tie the game. And you don't necessarily see that. So I don't know that, I think these Jets they're obviously a good hockey team. You can see it in the standings. They're not just smoke and mirrors. There's some substance to what they're doing. But I think they're also doing a good job of maybe getting under the skin of their opponent a little bit. We know that Pierre-Luc Dubois gets under the skin of every opponent, and there were some great net front battles again last night. But I think as an entirety, as an entity, the whole team is maybe beginning to frustrate the opponents, and you maybe saw that a little bit at the end of the game last night, Desi.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned Pierre-Luc Dubois, and this is no surprise because he's been doing this since he became a member of the Jets, but he was doing that long before with the Blue Jackets, right? And yeah, they have other players that can get it. Like Neil Pionk is a guy that, like, I think a lot of people that don't watch the Jets don't really see how he gets under the skin. And a lot of the time he doesn't get under the skin of players by with cross checks and with big hits. It's just kind of those like subtle kind of stick checks or, you know, a little bit of, you know, body positioning in front of the net. He's a really smart defenseman. But you're right. I think the third period, they definitely shut it down. And, you know, going back to what I was saying before, I mentioned this on the post-game show, like I'm not trying to be, you know, Debbie Downer here, but, you know, watching the New Year's Eve game against the Oilers, watching the game against, you know, the Flames or the Jets, you can't say that this was, you know, an A effort from the Jets. I mean, there were big parts of these games that you don't like. And the first period was really bad last night. Like we talked about it, like the fact that the Jets, you know, left that period tied was incredible. But
Right.
again, I mean, it's only a 1-goal lead. So Tampa Bay doesn't capitalize on some of their chances. So what are the Jets going to do? I mean, they're going to take, you know, every opportunity that they can get. So the formula, you don't love the formula, but, you know, for me, you know, it's not going to matter as much tomorrow against Vancouver because you can probably beat Vancouver with your C game. But, you know, next week you've got Detroit on Tuesday, and then you've got Buffalo and Pittsburgh back to back. All three of those teams, guys, by the way, are playing some pretty good hockey right now. Like, I don't know if the Red Wings or the Sabres are going to end up making the playoffs, but certainly the Penguins are a team that you expect. They're in a playoff spot right now. So, I mean, that's when I think, you know, you're going to have to elevate your game, and you're not going to be able to necessarily have one bad period. Because what we've seen before, guys, especially, you know, against the Washington Capitals, if you have one bad period, I mean, you really can't, you know, make up for that. You know, you allow 2 or 3 goals in a period against one of these teams. And, you know, we'll talk to Marty Biron later about the Sabres. They're going to get Eric Comrie back, but Jukka-Pekka Luukkonen and Craig Anderson is providing, you know, really good goaltending for them. And, you know, Pittsburgh is a team that obviously, you know, has had trouble getting out of the first round, but they're always tough, especially at home, right? So, I mean, that's where I think, you know, you get a little bit concerned. Not saying that I think the Jets are going to lose all 3 games on the road next week. That's not what I'm saying, but I'm just saying that, you know, I think Connor Hellebuyck has really been bailing them out a little bit, not a little bit, quite a bit in these games. And you're not going to be able to have one bad period or 1.5 bad periods. You're going to have to, you know, put together, you know, closely resembling a full 60-minute effort.
Well, but I mean, to that point, and that's a valid point that you make, as the full strength, more or less. I mean, sure, you know, Mason Appleton and Logan Stanley are still out of the lineup, and Saku Manalainen, but you really, now that you see them, you know, the top 6 back to what you expected it to be, you know, at the beginning of the year, or close to the, you know, at least a reasonable resemblance to it, you see just how much talent there was out of the lineup. And even without that talent in the lineup, they were still putting up a record, you know, prior to last night of 24-13-1. So now they're 25-13-1, and they're basically at full strength, Dave. You know, so to me, from my perspective, as you sit here, you know, 2 games away from the official mark of the season, the sky seems to be the limit for this team. They know that they can win in the face of adversity, and now they're going to get an opportunity to prove that they can win with their lineup, with their you know, close to full strength. So it's really going to be intriguing to me, as you mentioned, Ezzy, you know, can they get those slow starts behind them? Can they start to put together sort of that, you know, more fulsome effort that doesn't strictly rely on Connor Hellebuyck? That's what I think you want to see now, is that you want to see them making it almost easier on Connor Hellebuyck and using the talent that they've reacquired and have reinserted into their lineup to really, you know, step on their opponents even more, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any question, and I don't think, you know, anyone can quibble with what Ez is saying, because I think we've all watched these games and you've wondered in the first 10 minutes where the Jets are. And you can attribute that to their lineup and who they're missing. And now, again, you're going to understand that it's going to take a few games for this core group of players to get to their speed, you know, get to the same. Because look, Nikolai Ehlers, as we touched on, he played game 2. Now he's playing game 39. That's a lot of time missed in between games.
And he's coming off of sports hernia surgery, Dave, which is one of the harder surgeries, they say, to quickly recover from. Right?
Well, especially given the fact that he relies so much on speed, right? And so you've got that situation where you really want to ensure that these guys are. That's why, again, like I said, I kind of like the whole tossing them into the deep end of the pool as opposed to dipping your toe in, because it does force them to kind of get into the speed. And if the rest of your team, when you have Connor Hellebuyck, that does forgive a lot of mistakes. And so that's what we've seen with the Jets with these slow starts, is not necessarily mistakes, because, you know, the chances haven't necessarily been grade A in terms of, you know, being outshot, but they're being outshot consistently. You know, it's 8-1, 9-1, 10-1 in shots. through the first 10 minutes of every one of these games, which obviously means you don't have possession of the puck, which isn't a good thing. No team is going to want to start a game and not, possess the puck. And as he touched on it, I think it was like 78% in the first period of last night's game. So I just think that you need to really, the way you come out of the gate is going to be a big tell for this team. We'll start to see how, because this team can win, right? They, especially, I think it was Doug said they can always win when they're getting the special teams opportunities, because you look at the special teams, and especially with Nikolai Ehlers back out there, that first power play unit is lethal. They really are. I mean, it's just you, and especially you give this team a 5-on-3, and it's like, good night, nurse. Like this, there's no chance they're not. Two again. I'm sorry, Andre Vasilevsky. I know he was dealing with an illness earlier in the week, but I don't care. It's funny how people were saying this game is being billed as the battle of the two best goaltenders, and yet the guys making the biggest saves were Pierre-Luc Dubois and Dylan DeMello. But regardless, the fact is that the Jets starts are really going to be an area that they're going to have to focus on, because you can't continually be behind the 8 ball and trying to play catch up. Even if the score is 0-0, it is kind of demoralizing to just, kind of weather the storm and like as he said, let your goaltender get kind of beat up and then have to try and get back into the game.
Well, and I mean, I think also an area of concern, but I think this will resolve itself as those guys who were reinserted into the lineup get their their skating legs under them and get the feel for the puck a little bit more, is the lack of production at 5-on-5 last night. I mean, the Jets, won they get all their goals not at 5-on-5, and that's, I think, a couple times this year that they've done that. Now, that's not a recipe for success on a regular basis. The majority of the play is still at 5-on-5, and I don't expect that that's going. I think that's more of a function, as you mentioned, about getting four guys back into the lineup on one night. That sort of led to a lot of their struggles at 5-on-5. But, to your point, though, with the talent that they've assembled, with the talent they have on their special teams, if the opposition is going to get into penalty trouble, make them pay for it. And the Jets did that last night against Tampa Bay. They did that against Vancouver, however long ago that was. Take advantage of that lethal power play that should be, one of the better power play units in the league, Ezzy.
Yeah, absolutely. The special teams overall have been better this year. There's no doubt about that. I mean, the penalty kill clearly, I mean, for me, that's almost, more important than the power play. I think a lot of people would agree with that, because it just shows you how well you're playing as a team defensively, right? But, another thing to mention here, like we mentioned, the game tomorrow afternoon of Vancouver, of course, post-game show will be around 4:45. But then we talked about, that road trip. I mean, that to me, again, I'm not, setting the Jets up to fail here. I'm just saying, that's not the easiest road trip to go into Detroit and then have Buffalo, Pittsburgh, back to back on Thursday and Friday night. But then you look at kind of the schedule a couple of weeks, after that, and it's not the hardest schedule, guys, right? Like, you've got Arizona at home. Again, these weird kind of, 3-game road trips, 1 game at home, and then another, big road trip coming up. The Jets have 5 in a row on the road starting on the 17th. But, you've got Montreal, you've got Toronto, you've got Ottawa, Philly back to back, and then you've got Nashville there. So obviously, Toronto, Nashville, Ottawa's playing some decent hockey, even though I don't think they're going to end up being in the playoffs. I mean, you've got some easier games coming up against Arizona and Montreal, and then you throw that game tomorrow against Vancouver, right? So the schedule is not going to get harder until, later in the month, even though next week is not easy. But my point is that, this is, an opportunity, I think, for the Jets to take over first in the Central, or at the very least, stay within striking distance of the Stars.
Well, what you're seeing, though, is, to your point, if you want to look at the standing, and before I get into that, I just want to say, I don't know what the schedule maker is doing, but sending the Jets out east for 3 games, flying them home for 1 game, and then sending them back out east for another, to start at least another 3 games, and then it meanders through Nashville. It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, I just don't understand, why you put it's not like, and it's not like there's a big gap in those games. It's not like there's a week off where they're spending it at home. They go out east next week. They got, it's Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, if I'm not mistaken, on the road. You come back to play Arizona on the Sunday, and then you go right back out east on the following Tuesday. It just doesn't make any logical
You've got
sense.
Montreal that following week. The week after next week is Montreal, Ottawa, Montreal, Toronto, Ottawa, right? So again, it's a bit of a mixed bag, right? Like, I think, next week scares me a little bit more just because of the back-to-back and the fact that these teams are fighting for their playoff lives. Let's be honest. Like when you're talking about Detroit and Buffalo, I think they're still long shots. I mean, they're just in hard, like the Eastern Conference. I think if there's one takeaway for me, I mentioned this to Dave yesterday. I forget if I mentioned it on air just as we were watching the third period, but to me, the Eastern Conference is much better than the West. Like you've got some really good teams in the West, right? Vegas, Colorado, the Jets, Dallas. But to me, I look at the Eastern Conference, and it's possible Tampa Bay is your 8th seed. Like it really is. I mean, it's possible they finish 2nd or 3rd in that division in the Atlantic, but it's not out of the realm of possibility that a team like Tampa Bay or Toronto finishes in a wild card spot.
Well, I agree wholeheartedly that the East is better than the West. And you look at the West right now, you look at the standings, and we talk about banking points and all that. There's a sizable gap now between the Dallas and Winnipeg, and then Minnesota's close enough that they're still in that conversation because they have a couple games in hand. But then Nashville is 9 points behind the Jets. Colorado is 10 points behind the Jets. I mean, they're putting a pretty decent gap in between the top 2, top 3, and then those other teams in the Central, or the teams that'll be fighting for the wild card. So, yes, it's been a bit of a cliche, Dave, about banking points and everything else, but the gap is growing. It's not getting any smaller. The push that we're expecting from Colorado, and I still expect it, to be honest, hasn't come yet. They were up 2-0 against Vancouver on Thursday night, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was Thursday night, and they lost 4-2 to Vancouver. I mean, when you're up 2-0 on Vancouver, you usually expect to win that game 6-0. You don't expect to then give up 4 goals and lose. So, that push from Colorado hasn't happened yet. Nashville seems like a very much a mushy middle sort of team. I mean, what did they get from UC Saros the other night? 67 saves or something ridiculous like that.
64 saves, I think.
64 saves to beat the Hurricanes. I mean, they don't seem like they're, a world-beating team. So as the Jets continue to roll, winners now of 4 in a row, as this continues, the gap is only going to grow larger, which is going to make their lives a lot easier later on, including, the trade deadline, which is rapidly approaching and something that's going to be a hot topic of conversation from now through the end, through the next couple months, Dave.
I think what it ultimately comes down to, and again, we've talked about it a lot, is the importance of getting those points early and banking them. And we're seeing that, right? I mean, you're so far ahead of where you were last year. Drew, you've never looked so good as you completely froze. Okay, now you're back. But anyways, the Jets being able to, get those wins, even if you don't necessarily deserve it. And we've said it. You don't apologize for having one of the best goaltenders in the NHL. That's just the reality of your drafting. That's the reality of your developing. And so when you have that, then that's part of your team's reality. And so therefore you can rely on a guy like Connor Hellebuyck to make, to keep you in games that maybe you don't deserve to be in the first period, and then allow you to get back into it and win. So ultimately, I think the Jets have put themselves into a very good position. And you're right. Like I was talking about it with Daz last night on the show. I was shocked to see like how far ahead the Jets have become. And really you're seeing that separation of Dallas and Winnipeg and Minnesota from St. Louis and Nashville and Colorado. And I'm not saying one of those 3 teams can't go on a run, but what you've done if you're a Jets team is you've created such a gap that it seems fairly hard in today's NHL that's going to likely decrease in any significant way. Maybe one of them, but with all of them, it's unlikely. So from a Jets team's perspective, you're happy where you are. You're sitting here approaching the midpoint of the season. You're getting all these guys back, which is kind of like making trades, right? Like you're getting Nikolai Ehlers back. Well, how fresh is he? Because he hasn't played with the team in 3 months. And so you've got Blake Wheeler, Cole Perfetti. You've literally just added a top 6 line. And now you've got, so what kind of trade are you going to make? I mean, obviously if you're a Jets club, you may want to augment your depth and add some pieces to the 3rd line, 4th line to get a little more consistency and maybe some more scoring. But you've got to be very happy with where you are right now on January 7th.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to know where as we stand right now. And I agree with Drew. I mean, the trade deadline discussion, especially on TSN, is only going to heat up in the next coming weeks. Like once you get into February, it's like the countdown is on until the trade deadline. But it's hard to know, like, I know you guys talked about it last week, you and Jim, Dave, but when you consider that the Jets are now full health, right? Like it does kind of change a little bit as opposed to 2 or 3 weeks ago when you weren't sure, like, was Ehlers going to be, another week or whatever, right? So I would agree with you. I think, you're probably, looking at a defenseman, and you're probably looking at, adding some depth at forward, but, are the Jets going to dangle a first round pick? Like, is there something out there? Like, there's names out there, right? Like Bo Horvat is out there. Patrick Kane is out there, even a Brock Besser, Jacob Chikrin. Like, I just don't know if any of those names are, like, the fit has to be right. And what are you giving up, right? Like, is a first round pick, is it going to have to be a prospect, right? Because you're talking about guys that, depending on who you're talking about, I guess, there's only a certain amount of, years left on the contract, right? So it's kind of hard to know, would the Jets go big game hunting like they did in 2018 with Paul Stastny, or the year after with Kevin Hayes giving up a first round pick? I think the argument can be made, guys, that this is the year that the Jets should be dangling that first round pick.
I think it definitely, there's an argument to be made for that effect. And we'll talk about that and much more with Jason Bell, the sports editor of the Winnipeg Free Press, right after these commercial messages. Drew Mandel, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg with you on a Saturday morning. It's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show, live on YouTube and all of our social media platforms. Bottom of the hour. Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Drew Mandel, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg with you on this Saturday morning. And we're thrilled to welcome to the program our very good friend, Marty Bird, along with his handler, Jason Bell, the sports editor of the Winnipeg Free Press.
Brutal. Morning, fellas. I knew he'd get first billing.
Well, of course he's going to get first billing. Normally, this show, as we often say, goes for the birds. But now we actually have a bird, to keep the show together. And then we appreciate Marty coming, and Jason, we appreciate you coming as well.
Is he going to be the most famous Marty on the show today?
I don't think that's in doubt. There's no doubt Marty Bird is more famous than Marty Biron. Like, Marty might have had, like, a storied NHL career, and he might have over 100,000 Twitter followers. But I mean, Ozark was like one of the best series of all time, Jay.
That is very true. And when we adopted him, that's the name that he had. And we thought it was very fitting, obviously. So we kept it. And he's been lots of fun. And if he does something that might be a little bit offensive on my shoulder while the show is going on, I apologize in advance.
That's okay. Dave, Ezzy, and I do offensive things all the time, and we're still here. We haven't been canceled from our own show yet. So fingers crossed that Marty will get through it as well.
Well, I saw one of you in the last 24 hours. It's good to see you again, David, and great to see both the two guys in the one corner and the other corner.
Thank you. You're too kind. Jason, let's talk about the Winnipeg Jets because, they just keep on rolling. They had the brief blip right before the break where it seemed like the schedule and the injuries had caught up to them. They lost the 3 in a row. And then since then they've won 4 in a row. And last night was a heavyweight battle against a championship caliber team in the Tampa Bay Lightning. And the Jets didn't blink in the face of that. Special teams were a big part of it, but nonetheless, a 4-2 victory. Just from your perspective, is the sky the limit for this team? I know it's a little hyperbole and it's a little bit, maybe excitable, but the way you've seen them play this year, the way their record is right now, the fact they're getting healthy, why shouldn't people be getting really excited about this team?
I thought the sky was falling a little bit, Drew, a few weeks ago, obviously, when you felt they sort of tread water as long and as they could. And when they lost 3 in a row and yet they turned it around and they won 3 straight coming back to yesterday when they finally got all their players back. And these are a couple, fairly world-class players that came back to them. And I think we'd all agree that we certainly didn't see the best of the 4 last night, but a nice introduction to things, and yet the rest of the cast around them continue to do what they've been doing again since all this the injuries began, and they were great from start to finish, very defensively sound. At times sat back a little bit, but took it to some of the teams. And then last night, just it began slowly, but it just started to build. And then with the backstopping of Connor Hellebuyck, just another great effort. That was I think that's the kind of 2 points that most NHL coaches would love to see, especially as you could suggest an NHL caliber team. And you wonder if there's anybody right now in Tampa Bay having a show like this, calling the Winnipeg Jets a championship caliber team, because I think you have to consider them right in the mix in that Western Conference, and that's got to be very exciting for fans of this club that have that we're probably, after last season and not seeing very many changes to this lineup, we're wondering, is it going to be sort of more of the same? But it's really been anything but with the Winnipeg Jets this year.
Jay, we've got about 7 weeks to go before the NHL trade deadline. So I might be jumping the gun here. It might be a little bit early, but I don't think it's ever early on a Saturday morning, to talk about, possible moves from the Jets. And I think you'd agree that, there was, quite a few Jets fans a couple of weeks ago, maybe more so 3 weeks ago, that, thought maybe the Jets should make a few moves with all of the injuries. But really all Chevy did was, in terms of player movement, was, acquire Carson Kuhlman off the waiver wire to go with, Axel Jonsson-Fjallby earlier in the season. But I mean, I was mentioning this right before you jumped on, like, it's kind of tough to know, what type of player the Jets might bring in, considering that they're getting so close back to health. And as you talked about, right, you have 3 top 6 forwards in Perfetti, Wheeler, and Ehlers now back in the lineup. So do you see the Jets, I guess 2-part question, do you see the Jets dangling a first round pick similar to what they did in 2018 and 19? And do you see that first round pick bringing a defense? Like, is it more likely that the Jets would go after, a big game forward or a big game defenseman, especially if a first round pick is going the other way?
I think one of each would probably really do the trick. And if you're Kevin Cheveldayoff, and I have to admit, first of all, that I think all 4 of us would suggest we haven't always been necessarily supportive of what the general manager in the city has done, but probably every city there's people like us who have questioned some moves and lauded others. So, but I have to think that the way that the Western Conference shapes up, and with the uncertainty of a Colorado and all their injuries, and can some of the, can Dallas really keep up with what they're doing, and the Winnipeg Jets being right in the mix? I mean, at what point, fellas, do you not say this is the year to really go for it? And I don't know if necessarily this roster as it stands can make it all the way. I think could they surprise us all and do a 2018 and go for a run? Certainly, but why would you not, when and I'm not suggesting right now that they're going to get Jonathan Toews or they're going to get Patrick Kane or they're going to get Bo Horvat, or I'm just saying, wouldn't it be something if they did? And when you look at what the future holds for this club, certainly you watch the World Junior Hockey Championships and you had to have been very, very impressed with Chaz Lucius and Russian Party, and then also Brad Lambert is there. Ville Heinola is kind of languishing now, and the 6 that played last night on the back end, that's the 6 that I would certainly start. Logan Stanley is still kicking around and maybe have some value. And you talk about the first round draft choice, and the Jets will not be drafting. They'll not be in a situation where they're going to be they're going to be in the Connor Bedard sweepstakes unless they really. I don't think you can mathematically tank that much at this point. So you have to say, when is the time now? And I have to say that the time is now to at least make a run, and I think that would include trying to get another top end forward and another top end blue liner, and not saying necessarily. Does that mean that Dylan Samberg then maybe takes a backseat? He's still a young man. Why not? But I think the fans would love to see him make a move, and I don't think Kevin Cheveldayoff will stand pat this year. I just think that they're in a situation where they need to upgrade if they want to really make a push.
Saturday morning, you're watching the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're live on YouTube. We're live on all of our social media platforms. Drew Mandel, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsberg are joined by Jason Bell, sports editor of the Winnipeg Free Press, and his partner in crime, Marty Bird.
Well, Jay, my first question to you, because it's the most important one, because the one that's being asked in the chat, and I think I know the answer, but I don't want to speak for you. I believe Marty is a lovebird, but the folks in the chat are curious. What kind of bird is Marty?
He's a conure, and my wife is the smart one of the two, as it probably the same situation in your household. And he has a green-cheeked conure.
My apologies.
He's looking. He's kind of right going. Ooh.
There we go.
Kind of
okay.
The old SCTV in and out of the picture. If any of you are old enough to understand.
So Jay, obviously, Marty's favorite player is Kyle Conyer.
Oh God!
You hadn't heard that one before.
All right, end the show,
well
Drew.
Very, very well done. As I have to give you props on that one.
Well, I've had that one in my back pocket for at least a couple days
for 2 years now.
Jay,
how are you feeling, by the way, Ez? We were having a good thought for you.
A little bit sore. Hold on, I've got my frozen corn here. That's what I've been using during the commercial breaks. But no, Dr. Jay Buenafide he was very gentle. He took really good care of me.
We can in another show, maybe if there's a late night version of the show, we can talk about my experience of it. And it wasn't pretty, but that was a long time ago. I still remember what it was like, though.
Jay, we're just surprised. Jay, we're just surprised that Ezzy had anything left in the holster after his experience, but he did have that.
I definitely feel a little bit lighter.
Children up right now.
Look, Jay, I've got to deal with the fact that that frozen corn or peas are in my house right now, and they've been on Ezzy for the last 24 hours. So I'm trying to have as best an attitude as I can. But let's keep us about hockey.
What about that game last night? What about that game against Tampa last night? I
was just gonna say, let's focus on the hockey, because one of the guys in that game, he had a significant impact on the game. That's Josh Morrissey, 3 assists in the game. I mean, he's just taking his game to that next level. I mean, he's on a 100-point pace for his career for this season right now. The things he's doing are remarkable. And yet it's interesting because, and I was talking about this with Ezzy after the show, you do wonder if, I'm not going to call it like Winnipeg bias or anything like that, but I was reading, I think ESPN did the kind of like a mid-season or approaching mid-season Norris Trophy expectations. Josh Morrissey was barely there. I mean, it was Cale Makar, it was Erik Karlsson, it was Adam Fox.
It was Adam Fox, of course.
Yeah, and yet you're sitting there going, are people not watching what this kid is doing? Because it's remarkable. I mean, he's the second best in terms of point production. He's done so many things for this team, and he is the heart and soul of this Jets club. And obviously the All-Star nod is a nice recognition for him and the way they did it. And I thought it was interesting because I don't think we've ever seen the Jets video room, and we saw Rick Bowness presenting it there in that video room yesterday. So I don't know. Like, to me, what he's doing is remarkable. We're seeing it obviously on a nightly basis. And yet it's almost like, sure, he got the All-Star nod because the NHL's kind of paying attention, but is the rest of the league? Because remember, that's an award that's voted on by the writers. And if they're not paying attention, if that's the consensus right now is he's not even making that top kind of 5 list. Like, he got I think 1 first place vote. And again, I'm not saying that ESPN is the be all and end all, but there's a significant number of writers in the US. If they're not paying attention, I mean, really, and again, I understand it's not about individual awards. And if you ask Josh Morrissey if he's going to win, he wouldn't care less. But it just seems interesting to me that there just doesn't seem to be a lot of buzz given what this kid is doing.
Yeah, and I think that's where you'll see as the season goes on. As long as Josh stays healthy and continues to produce and continues to play as soundly defensively as he has, because I think I think last night people are always, every time there's a goal scored, at least people are in my circles are saying, geez, did Josh, get a touch on that one? I mean, they're actually a lot more excited about him getting the second assist than the goal scorer. If it's not Josh Morrissey, because they certainly wanted to rack up points because they're trying to compare him to Erik Karlsson, who's going. But Erik, I mean, I haven't watched a lot of San Jose this year, but I think that from what I have seen, Erik Karlsson on that team doesn't really play like a prototypical defenseman. He's almost like he's like a fourth forward
rover,
and exactly is. And it's, for a guy who thinks Erik Karlsson is a brilliant hockey player. I mean, the last few years have been tough to watch a guy who you thought his skills and his abilities were really dwindling, and it's just around him. The team is so terrible. But he's great for Erik Karlsson. But I mean, you just cannot say enough about what Josh Morrissey has done here. And, I think the last couple of years, people would say, hey, he's a good player, but, he's not a number 1 defenseman. This team needs a number 1 defenseman. And I think the doubters would have to maybe eat their words a little bit, because he's playing like a number 1 defenseman. I mean, he's playing in all situations. He plays against all the other teams best. He's quarterback in the power play on 5-on-5. He's been brilliant, and his plus minus, I think he's plus 13 or something this morning, 14, something like that. So for us of course you guys know that I'm not in the dressing room anymore, but I have talked to Josh a lot, and I had the privilege of seeing him in a golf tournament this summer, and we had had a really nice chat. And if you hope for good people, there's just no one finer than this kid. And I say kid because, 3 times.
They're all kids compared to us.
Exactly. So
how old are we now that we're calling 27-year-old Josh Morrissey a kid?
Well,
I
we're
guess-
in our
I
late
guess-
50s, as it turns out in my
Yeah,
case.
yeah. Drew's
But,
case, early 80s.
I think it's been fun to watch for people who've been around him since the day he was picked in the first round. I think I think it's folly to suggest that he's not a number one defenseman in every sense of the word. And now it's up to the Winnipeg Jets marketing and PR people to be sending out those tapes and making sure that whatever they do, whatever tricks of the trade they have, that the hockey world gets to know about Josh Morrissey, because as you suggested, he doesn't have the cachet of an Adam Fox or a Cale Makar and Erik Karlsson, Victor Hedman, who I'm sure fans were glad that Victor Hedman wasn't there last night. I think he's awaiting the arrival of a child. His wife is pregnant. But Victor Hedman, I mean, they're going to automatically think it's his award because he kind of dominates in that situation. But again, if you're a hockey aficionado and you watch the highlights at night or are privy to some of the way the Jets are winning hockey games, Josh Morrissey is every bit a worthy Norris candidate.
And you look at last night's roster, and David Gustafsson was a healthy scratch last night. It seems like Kevin Stenlund has maybe overtaken him in the pecking order or in the depth chart, or, when it comes to the depth forwards for the Jets, especially up the middle. Is it that Gustafsson isn't performing up to snuff, or is it that Stenlund has sort of expectations, from your perspective?
Well, I mean, there was a time, I guess about a week ago, where we were talking about this in our little chat room, and the great hockey minds of the city, big names like Scott Billick and Mike McIntyre and some of the real experts around our town. And we had a little bit of we have a chat room that goes back about 3 years. And of course, if it ever became public, we'd probably be in prison or something. But we talked about that very question, and Kevin Stenlund just looks like a pro. And of course, he came with pro games under his belt. He's not the fastest man out there. And of course, from the perches of where we were, David, when you see 26 and 28, you think they're separated at birth because they look exactly the same. But Kevin Stenlund is just, and Rick Bowness really trusts this guy. He's kind of very smart hockey player. Again, he's not dripping with talent, but his work ethic is great. Positionally, he's very good. Not bad in the draw, tremendous penalty killer, and has become a big part of what continues to be a great PK. And just seems, I mean, not NHL ready because he's 25 or 26 years old, but he's a much more prepared pro than David Gustafsson. And Gustafsson is still only, I can look up to Manuk because he'll know, is he 22 years old right now? Is he something? So, I mean, they're not turning their back on David Gustafsson, but on the here and now, Kevin Stenlund is just a better fit. And, I think we kind of all figured out how things would have gone with the returnees. I mean, Mikey Eyssimont, he's kind of gone back to what he is. He's a fairly elite AHL player. Jansen Harkins has been, I think we would all agree, just a disappointment. And because I think you would have liked to have seen Jansen really step up during the stretch where the injuries occurred. And I don't think he has. And it's never for a lack of trying with Harkins. But again, he's with this roster, the way it's constructed right now, he's right where he's supposed to be. And then Carson Coleman and Axel Fialbi, they fill roles. I mean, how many times did he have a chance to shoot last night and he just fumbled the puck? It was actually it was a little bit funny. Then it was just kind of it became kind of cringeworthy. But again, the effort was there. Long story short, I think Kevin Stenlund is the best of that group. And I just don't see him getting sort of supplanted right through. I think they'll carry this guy as long as they can because he's doing a lot of great things for them.
Yeah, and even when Saku Manalainen and Mason Appleton come back, Jay, I agree. I think that there's a good chance that Stenlund will be on that fourth line. And then, is it Carson Kuhlman who becomes the 13th forward? Is it actually
to me it is, I think, yes, because I don't think you're going to, I mean, Morgan Barron is just again,
that's what I was going to ask you about, Jay.
Yeah, so I thought
just talk about Morgan Barron because yesterday, not just the empty netter, but he was just so good on the penalty kill.
PK and the it was funny that he won that fastest skater competition. Like, who would have thought that, right? And then you see him hustle, just pure hustle play last night, and again, he doesn't do things really pretty, but he and Lowry have this thing going right now where they're hard on pucks. They keep the puck down low like the old days of. He's not an Andrew Kopp. I'm not going to suggest that, but there's some chemistry there, and he is just not coming out of the lineup. I don't think if it's probably Coleman and Axel Fjallby. I'm sorry saying that wrong. Yeah, I think Appleton will get back into the lineup. I'm not so sure about what happens down the road for the long stretch. But this club has always had a problem with the bottom six. They've always had a problem with the bottom six, haven't they? Other than, when Lowry and Kopp were going in the Tanev year. I like the bottom six right now. And remember, Gagne is still... He does some interesting things when he can play on that second power play unit, and they need a veteran presence with a little bit more upside goal scoring at the end of a game. So, he may not see as many starts as he has now once the other two get back, but he's going to be factoring.
Well, and that's the thing. You can rotate those guys through, right? Like, sorry, Drew, I was just going to say, like, Sam Gagne can be your 13th forward.
Yes.
Axel Jonsson-Fjallby can be your 13th forward, depending on who you're playing, right? Like, what do you need? Do you need somebody to kill penalties? And the thing is, there's a common theme here, right? Kevin Stenlund, David Gustafsson, Jonsson-Fjallby, Gagne, like all of these guys are versatile forwards. So I agree with you. I mean, they may not be getting enough. Like when you talk about Gustafsson, he's still looking for his first goal. As you mentioned, Jonsson-Fjallby, he's all hustle and he's all grit. He just doesn't have, an elite scoring touch at the NHL level. He's just not a guy that's going to score a lot, even though he puts himself in positions to score, right? So I look at the.
Well, he was in a low slot with the puck all alone, right. And he handled it like I would have in rec hockey, like no shot away and got twisted around. And as I said, I think I looked over at Dave, and we're just like oh geez, you almost want to see him just snipe one. Not that I really care how he produces, but just for his effort, and that this is zero puck luck. But anyway.
Well, I mentioned it after the game against, maybe it was the Vancouver game that Dave and I were doing post-game last week. I saw on Twitter, and I can't remember if I said it on Twitter, but that does Axel Fjallby's game change at all if he plays without a stick? Because, the stick is almost secondary to everything that he does, because he doesn't have any of that scoring touch around him. He's all hustle and grit and banging and effort, and which is important. You need guys like that. So it's not to take it away from him, but you're right. When you're in the low slot all alone, you'd like to see a guy, maybe be able to deposit one past.
What about Nate Schmidt last night? Who again is a little like I thought his effort was terrific last night. He mixed it up a little bit, and again they talk about this team toughness, and I thought again last night was just a great indication of that. A great. Great pushback. I mean, Scheifele does what he does, and he throws the hit, and then he's willing to drop the gloves. And he actually threw one haymaker that just missed, and I'm not a proponent of fighting, but that was just a weird one to see. And what about the Stamkos thing with Ehlers? Like, what was that? Like, I mean, I think we all love Steve Stamkos. I mean, this guy has been utter class for 14, 15 years, and then he just stands over him and he starts pounding on Ehlers. It was very odd, but I just, there's a lot of great things to like about that game. And sometimes they don't win. They're not the most exciting games in the world, but when you appreciate what this team is doing under Rick Bowness, you go, I think winning hockey is 2 points is a lot more important than always entertaining your fans and losing 6-5.
No question about that. Jason Bell is our guest on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show Saturday morning. We're live on YouTube. We're live on all of our social media platforms. Jason, of course, as the sports editor of the Winnipeg Free Press.
Jay, you've touched on a little bit, because with all these players, especially with the ones who are returning, and it sounds like, when Rick Bowness spoke about it the other day, he said that Logan Stanley and Mason Appleton are still a ways away, which means they'll probably be back next game. But the reality is that, they're still probably, a few weeks away at least. So the only guy who's, imminently you're expecting, but not necessarily, is Saku Maenalainen. But it becomes a roster question, right? Because the Jets have an experience now. They sent down Jansen Harkins. They reassigned Christian Reichel. They lost Michael Eyssimont to the San Jose Sharks yesterday.
Good for him, by the way. Good for him.
Yeah, it'll be a good opportunity to play on a terrible hockey team, but it'll still be playing in the NHL, which is better than, of course, if you're in the AHL. So it's another opportunity for the Colorado product. But, to me, the question now becomes, because you do have to be concerned about your depth, right? If you put a guy like any of those names, right? Axel Jonsson-Fjallby, Carson Kuhlman, David Gustafsson, if you put any of those guys on waivers, there's a concern. Now, if you're not going to play Ville Heinola, and you already said if you're going to roll your 6, that's your 6, what are you doing with Ville Heinola? Are you going to keep him up in the NHL and maybe play him once every third, fourth game? Or are you going to put him back into, because he played well before he sat. He was playing well. So the question becomes, what do you do with him? Are you better off? Because remember, he's waiver exempt, right? He's waiver exempt for 2 more years. Well, this year and next year. So that works against him, but it works in the Jets' favor.
Yeah, I think, nice infusion of talent for the Moose the last few days, and Billy Hanel certainly wouldn't hurt in their back end. And I just think as they get down to the stretch they've already got, not that Neil Pionk and Kyle or Josh Morrissey are midgets by any stretch of the imagination, aren't smallish players, but I mean, I think Kyle Kobiabanko is the guy you want as your seventh defenseman, and you want to continue to see Ville Heinola play. That's how I would see things. I don't think it does anybody a great service to have him sitting for the next what the Jets hope is probably 4 months, February, March, April, May. And if these are your six, then him sitting in the press box doesn't really serve a great purpose. And I did like what he did the 3 or 4 games that he played, Dave. You're absolutely right. Played with a lot more confidence. I don't think he coughed up the puck as much. He didn't look outsized in the corner that much. And how many times have we seen Ville Heinola, not be able to handle a guy, so he drags him down or he puts an arm around across the guy, and it's a 2-minute automatic 2 minutes for the guy, just because and Josh Morrissey has proven that I can go back all the way to Toby Enstrom. You can play that position not being a big man. And I don't think Ville Heinola has had quite learned that yet, but we've seen some strides. But I think the best usage of him is to be in the AHL and, a veteran player, maybe it's a Logan Stanley as your seventh guy down the stretch, and you do something else with Kobiabanko. But I don't think there's any great tragedy that he's not playing with his club right now. He may feel that way, but
to me,
Jason,
sorry, I was just gonna quickly say, sorry, Drew, you're a little bit delayed there, even though I'm the one that's really delayed. But you look at that situation with Logan Stanley, as Dave mentioned, he's not going to come back for tomorrow afternoon's game, but he will eventually come back. And right now, I agree that Kyle Capobianco, and that's the thing, you want Heinola playing. You don't want him kind of playing, once every 3 or 4 games. So just wanted to get that in there, Jay. That I know you needed to know that I agreed with you. So
I appreciate that, and because I'm so fragile. But who does Logan Stanley take the place of? Like, nobody right now. And I'm not trying to trash the guy. I'm just saying that the 6 that played last night, that is the best 6 that this organization can put out. And it's better for my mental psyche that I don't go on Twitter, because the people who continue to track, somebody said that Ville is better than Dylan Sandberg and might even be better than Neil Pionk. And I just want to start breaking stuff, because they're not living in reality. And Logan Stanley, again, I don't think anybody would say that about Logan Stanley, but I just don't think, again, nothing against the guy. And he too has made great strides and has put himself in a position to be with the big club as the extra defenseman. That's where I see him right now. So,
Jay, we'll let you go on this last one. Pierre-Luc is almost a unicorn, I think, in the league, in the size and the strength and his ability to just get under the skin of every opponent that he plays against, but at the same time, putting up numbers that are indicative of top line talent. Obviously his contract status is something that's going to resolve over the next year or two, but his impact on ice for this team, night in and night out, just seems to be more than just that's on the score sheet, I would say.
Yeah, he's again, everybody, we heard it again last night in the press box, the word beast, just because of what he can do, the way that he's got great hands. I mean, I really don't think it's easy tipping a 100-mile-an-hour slap shot. I think you got to have some good hand-eye. You got to have some skill there. And the way he's just so brash and crashes around, and he just looks so incredibly strong that you just go, this guy is going to carry this team, you think. And obviously Connor Hellebuyck is crucially important than Josh Morrissey is, but I just feel like Pierre-Luc Dubois is the guy that's really going to lead them. And he certainly doesn't look like a guy who wants out. He certainly doesn't look like the guy who played his last shift in Columbus. I don't know. That guy just isn't around right now, or he's fooling everybody. So I don't know what's going to happen with him. And again, somebody was suggesting the other day that I think was it a blog or something that the Jets have to just throw as much money as they can at this guy. Well, the Jets are going to throw money at this guy. There's no question they're going to. They've been a team near the cap ceiling for a couple of years now. They're not afraid to spend money. That's contrary to what people think. They're not afraid to spend money. Look at their salary cap right now, where they're at. It's about where he wants to play, because you can get the same money everywhere. So I can't say they should just but it would be for this franchise, it would be a shame if he wasn't around for the long haul, because he's just such a crucial piece. Last night he was, it's hard to say one of his better games, because has he taken a night off this year? I haven't seen it yet. And just a great player to watch. Great player to watch if you like that. If you like the guy that he can be a perimeter player, but man, when his work around the net is it's just really fun to watch. So
just the net front battle, sort of
for sure.
Well, the way he gets into just cross-checking wars with defensemen and everything else.
Oh yeah, I mean, and you sometimes wonder if maybe he crosses the line and he takes a minor that you really don't want to see at an inopportune time. So it's a bit of a trade-off, but I think that the Jets will take that trade-off most nights. And I'm trying to figure out which player he reminds me of in the last 10 or 20 years. And I think the Cam Neely comparison is probably a little bit, you're talking about a guy that's a Hall of Fame type player, and maybe that's stretching it a bit, but just, the combination of size, strength, and then this great skill. And he says all the right things, and he's doing all the right things. And just a tremendous player for the Winnipeg Jets.
I got one comparable. He's one of my favorite players of all time. He's going to be a Hall of Famer, but one guy I think I would throw out there as a comparison is Ryan Getzlaf.
Yeah.
That's a guy, and again, I don't know if he's ever gonna, reach the heights of Getzlaf, because as I mentioned, to me, he's a surefire Hall of Famer with the Stanley Cups, what he's done, at the international level with Canada and everything like that. But just the size and skill and everything like that, right? Like Getzlaf is one guy that always comes to mind, just and more so stylistically, Jay, the way he plays.
Yeah, that's bang on, and you almost feel like, he's got an invisible letter on his chest right now, because in every sense of the word, he's the leader. He's a leader on this team. Just
Jason
like
Bell
Getzlaf.
is the sport. Yeah, exactly. Jason Bell is the sports editor of the Winnipeg Free Press. He and his sidekick Marty Bird join us this morning on the Illegal Curve.
Is there any chance we get a season 5 of Ozark?
I think, didn't everybody die at the end? I'm not sure.
Yeah, everybody died. Yeah.
I don't think they actually did die. I can't remember. We're into all the Yellowstones right now. We've moved on.
Oh, nice.
The sun.
I want to watch White Lotus.
Didn't the sun shoot somebody?
Yeah, he did. That's exactly right. He did.
Yeah, that was the private investigator.
No. But the private investigator. He opened the hotel door.
Hopefully, we're not ruining it.
Thanks, guys. I'm in season.
Big spoiler.
I'm actually in season 2 right now. But thank you for ruining it.
My wife just said.
I heard.
We're making it all up, David. Everybody got up. They're all thriving.
Yeah, Marty Bird survived. He's good.
Okay.
The Bird I'm talking about.
It ended with a really weird song and dance routine, Dave. You're fine. You didn't miss anything. Yeah, you'll keep going at it. It's all good. Jason, thank you.
Don't stop believing at the end.
That's
okay.
Right. A little bit of journey, just like the Sopranos ended.
I was like, are we doing Sopranos now, or are we doing
Fade to Black?
One last thing. Did you watch second season of White Lotus, Ez?
No, I haven't watched any of it, but it's I think it's because I just stayed at an all-inclusive resort in Mexico that I want to watch it. But everybody's talking about White Lotus, so I got to check it out.
And you got home okay, so that's the main thing.
Yeah.
Take care, guys.
Yeah, we paid to sabotage his flight, and he still made it. We're surprised about it.
Yeah.
Jay, thank you, buddy.
Happy New Year, Jay. Thanks for joining us.
Take care.
Have a great weekend. Jason Bell from the Sports Winnipeg Free Press. Let's head to break. When we come back, more of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show, more Jets talk. Drew Mandel, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg with you. Hour number 2 up next.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hi, Ez. A strange question for you. But why are you lying on the ground being crushed by a piano?
Well, Drew, I definitely tried to carry this baby grand piano down the stairs by myself, and somehow I failed miserably.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, that was a silly question on my part. My apologies. Would you like me to call Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage to help you move the piano? They are the most experienced piano moving company in Winnipeg, after all.
Yes, please call Rollies and hurry. This piano is very, very heavy.
Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage offers stress-free residential moving services while taking great care of your personal belongings, including your piano. At Rolly's, no job is too big or too small. For more information, visit rollys.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go...
We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs from restorative to cosmetic dentistry and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal. Starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
Saturday morning, welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Drew Mandel, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg. What are you eating there? As in, it better not be those peas or corn niblets or whatever's been icing you down as of late. Dear God, I hope not.
No, it's absolutely here. By the way, I still have it here for my region.
That's good.
That bag of frozen corn is not going in the garbage. It's going in the Brady landfill.
Well, everything.
I'm just eating a granola bar.
Okay, but
Here's
you
the
realize that
wrapper.
you just for the record, you realize that your garbage does end up in the Brady landfill, right?
No, but I mean, I'm taking it like directly to the Brady landfill.
Oh, I see. Okay.
What I'm saying is that bag needs to be incinerated. Like nobody.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Nobody needs to be anywhere near that bag of corn. It's been somewhere where nobody should ever go.
Yeah, it's very true. The ghosts that would come out, that corn lived a good life and was one day away from retirement, and this is how it has to end. It's really upsetting for everybody involved in it. But nonetheless, yes, it's good to see that you are
you like corn niblets
on your way to recovery. No, I don't want any corn niblets right now. Thank you.
They said, do you like corn niblets?
I actually really enjoy canned corn as like a side. Like, you have some chicken, some salad, little corn niblets on the side.
Well, all you have to do, if you like corn, all you have to do is go to see our friends in Morden, because they have fantastic corn. Morden Corn and Apple Festival at the end of summer, end of August every year. That's a joy to go to.
And Drew likes to listen to corn with a K.
Yes, I'm a huge corn fan. You know me. Yeah. I'm clearly a corn fan. I used to like corn the vegetable until about I don't know, let's say 24, 36 hours ago, until you went into your little experiment there. Then now it's off limits in this house.
Drew's never going to eat Green Giant ever again.
Bruce is saying that as he can put that corn back in the freezer. It ain't going to be my freezer, Bruce, because then it'll contaminate all the food in my freezer. Not that I ever eat it, but still, I like to know that it's there.
No, that shouldn't have been allowed in your house. It's like the episode of Seinfeld where Kramer doesn't wear underwear, and the only thing separating Kramer from the rest of the Gabardine is a thin layer of Gabardine. Exactly right. There you go, Dave. You got it exactly right. Let's talk about the bottom six of the Jets, because I think that's like the top six is clearly defined, and Adam Lowry and Morgan Barron are turned into a great tandem sort of on that third line. And we were touching on it a bit with Jason there. The bottom of the lineup is still sort of churning and it's in flux a little bit. But I honestly think that's a good thing for this team, because Rick Bowness can use it as a carrot. You play hard, you're going to be in the lineup. Yeah, if you have an off night, maybe not necessarily an off night, and it's a bad result, but an off night, or you're looking like you're a little bit, heavy in the legs, and you maybe need a break. Well, we have somebody else who can really sort of seamlessly step in and fill that role without it really being a significant drop off. As things stand right now, and obviously roster reinforcements or trades that could maybe improve a third line or make it even an even better third line might change things. But right now, the flexibility that the Jets have when it comes to sort of the bottom of their lineup, I think, is an enviable feature right now of this team.
Yeah, I don't think it's a problem that you're kind of rotating players, between the third and fourth lines, or rotating them in and out of the lineup, right? Like with a guy like Axel Jonsson-Fjällby, or right now, David Gustafsson found himself a healthy scratch. And I mentioned this on the postgame show last night. I wouldn't be at all surprised, boys, if Gus Bus goes into the lineup. I don't know if it would be for Jonsson-Fjällby, but I think Jonsson-Fjällby would be a candidate. And yeah, once you get Mason Appleton and Saku Maanalainen back, I mean, the easy choices probably to come out of the lineup would be Axel Jonsson-Fjällby and Carson Kuhlman, right? Possibly Kevin Stenlund as well. But clearly the Jets coaches like the fact that he can play center or wing and he can kill penalties, right? So it's clearly the players that end up staying in the lineup are going to be, those players. And Maanalainen and Appleton can both kill penalties. So again, going back to our conversation with Jay Bell, great talk with Jay and Marty Bird. I mean, this is a much better, bottom six overall. And don't get me wrong, I have concerns, guys. Like Adam Lowry, he's struggling. What is it, 11 games now? He hasn't scored a goal, but he's still having a good first half of the season with, 21 points, right? So there are some concerns that, you're not getting a lot of goals from. We talked about Gus Bus. We talked about, he's still looking for his first goal. Jonsson-Fjällby, he only has, what does he have, 1 or 2 goals, right? So I think there are some concerns, Drew, longer term, right? Like looking more into, the final month or two into the season when they're making their playoff push. That's when I get a little bit more concerned that, you're not getting enough scoring. I think that the impact of the third and fourth lines are being felt in terms of, how they play. And we've talked about, the cycle game. They're able to create offensive off that, but also, how they're contributing to the penalty kill. So even though they're not scoring a ton of goals, you've made up for that in other ways, right? Especially getting more goals from your back end. I mean, that's been a huge thing this year, led by Josh Morrissey, right? So I think, I do believe that, if I'm looking at it like what is the biggest, what do the Jets need the most, prior to the deadline, and what would they need? It's clearly, bringing in a top 6 forward, and, maybe that moves Blake Wheeler down the lineup. Maybe it's bringing in a more impactful player on the third line. But when you look at, all due respect to guys like Carson Kuhlman and Axel Jonsson-Fjällby, these guys just aren't going to provide a ton of offense. So if you look at the last few years of teams that have won the Stanley Cup, I mean, you got to have a little bit more offensive, a bit more of an offensive punch on the third line. So right now, I don't think it's an issue. When Maanalainen and Appleton come back, I don't think there's going to be any drop off at all. But I think it remains to be seen who's going to come out of the lineup, because right now, I think, Stenlund has really found a really nice role on this team.
Well, Running Man has which you highlighted the comment there, Dave. He's got an interesting point there about great special teams covering up any warts. But the difference is, come playoff time, we know that the game is called differently. We know that the game officiated differently. We know it's a lot harder to get power play opportunities. And now whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing, it's just the way it is. The NHL calls it differently. They would pretend that they wouldn't, but we all know that they're full of poop when they try and make that claim. So you do need to be able to score. Yeah, you do need to be able to score at 5-on-5 more so come playoff time, which is why I think, to your point, Ezzy, it's one of the things the Jets might be looking for is another top 6 guy, or another guy who's sort of right between that second and third line player, similar to what Blake Wheeler is at this point, where you can sort of be able to generate a little bit more, and maybe you turn that third line, the which is right now Barron and Lowry that are driving it, but you give them a little bit of offensive upside to that line as well. Because you remember back in 17-18, wasn't Brian Little basically the fourth line center, playing a depth role for this team?
Third line, and then Lowry was the fourth line center.
Right, but he was playing, so they were really deep with their forward group, and I don't think they're at that level. So that might be why you're looking for a sort of a bigger name or a more offensively inclined player to shore up some of your roster, especially up front, Dave.
Well, I think you hit it on the head. You're looking not for a guy who's going to be, nobody's supplanting Connor Dubois and Ehlers, right? So you really just want to augment what you have, and I think adding depth is what the Jets organization is going to look to do, and you are looking in that sort of kind of hybrid between a second line and third line, forward who, most likely is right now. You would think you're right, Drew. Barron, Lowry, third guy who's going to provide offense and who's going to be that sort of, if he needs to jump up, he can jump up into that second line spot or first line spot, whatever it is, and do that. Because the reality of the NHL is injuries are going to happen. It's not like the Jets got healthy and like, okay, well, we got all our injuries out of the way. Now we're healthy for the rest of the way. There's nothing that says that, obviously. And so that's something you have to guard against. And you have enough guys that you can intermingle, as he said, on the third and fourth lines, that you're allowing you to still maintain a very good penalty kill, whether it's Axel Jonsson-Fjällby, whether it's Kevin Stenlund, whether it's David Gustafsson, but those guys aren't going to provide you with the offense necessarily that you need. Or Carson Kuhlman. I mean, sorry, guys, Carson Kuhlman's not a top six forward. He just has had too many opportunities and he just doesn't bury them. So, I mean, at the end of the day, you need someone who's going to finish off on those opportunities. And right now the Jets aren't getting that. So you're getting guys who are in position to have success, and yet they're not doing what they need to do. And they're not, I mean, how many times has Rick Bowness said in his media availabilities, whether it's with respect to the defense or the offense, seize the opportunity that is ahead of you. And you talked about, or Jay talked about Jansen Harkins, and you see all of these guys, and you see all of these guys who have these opportunities to, I mean, it wasn't as if Ehlers and Wheeler and Perfetti weren't out for significant periods of time. So someone could have come along and taken that opportunity and run with it. Not saying that they would have kept it when those guys were ready to return, but the reality was you would have shown that the organization had the depth and they didn't need to make a move. I think they'll make a move. They'll augment it with a player kind of like, as said, like they'll do a Stasny type. They're not going to do a blockbuster, I don't think.
I still think I'll repeat. I said this, I don't know, a month ago. I like Sean Monahan a lot on Montreal. He's been playing on the wing, but he can play center. He's a guy who's in the last year of his contract. The Habs, there was a first rounder. They basically got him for free from Calgary.
Yeah,
but
they took
a first rounder.
They helped Calgary salary cap wise.
Right. So Sean Monahan is a guy that, like, look at the big names are Ryan O'Reilly and Bo Horvat and Patrick Kane, Jacob Chychrun on the back end, right? You're starting to hear Matthias Ekholm's name if the Predators especially fall out of the playoff race. But a guy like a Monahan, another guy that was on the Athletics trade target board, was like a guy like Nick Ritchie or Max Domi. Like, these are guys that give you more offense on your third line, right? So Ritchie's a guy that he was a healthy scratch earlier in the season, but he's also a guy that has, I think, 9 or 10 power play points. So he could probably go out there, and he's a big guy, right? So I think I like Monahan obviously more than Ritchie or Max Domi, who's obviously traveled around a lot. But I'm just saying, to me, those are more third line guys, as opposed to, you're going to have to give up a lot, guys. I don't know if you've noticed, Bo Horvat's kind of having a good season. So, I mean, you're going to have to give up more than a first round pick to get Bo Horvat, right? Like, he's the captain of the Canucks. So I would maybe, again, maybe Chevy, brings in a guy like Brock Besser, or maybe he brings in, one of those bigger name guys. But to me, like a Sean Monahan makes a ton of sense for this team.
Well, let me ask you guys this. I mean, as things currently stand, where the Jets are in the standings, and let's fast forward another couple weeks where, and if they're still in a similar position, and I don't expect there's going to be a significant drop off, there's no indicator that this team's going to go into a tailspin. Are you comfortable dealing the first round pick this year for, as part of an upgrade? I mean, because from my perspective, it's a no-brainer.
It's going to be a late, exactly. It's a late first rounder. Yeah. You're going to, what's it going to be, 22nd to 27th overall, something like that. I mean, it's not going to be any higher than probably 20th overall. So it's a late first round pick, right, Drew? So I think, especially with the expiring contracts coming up, right, the big ones, Scheifele, Dubois, Hellebuck. I mean, it just makes a ton of sense to be all in this year. Sorry, go ahead, Dave.
No, I just want to jump in and say, like, look, you're all for accruing prospects, and you want the organization. And we saw, when they were going for it earlier, 4 or 5 years ago, they were willing to trade those first round picks, and then the organization had a lack of that. Right now, they've re-added to the prospect pool with those, first rounders, and you've added Heinola, you've added Chaz Lucius, you've added Cole Perfetti, you've added obviously Lambert and McGroarty. So you've added a bunch of guys who are going to be in the system for, the next kind of round when these guys, the older guys are leaving. But we've talked about it. Jets players. I mean, I remember, I can't remember the media availability with Blake Wheeler, and someone asked him about something about the draft. And it's like, what does this guy care about that? Well, why would they? I mean, again, if you're saying, hey, this is going to be good for the organization in 5 years, but it could also make a difference this year for your team. Well, I'm pretty sure every player is going to say, well, let's make a difference for my team this year and let's do something. So, I mean, at the end of the day, at some point, you have to say, look, as you just said, you've got Connor Hellebuyck, for 2 more years. You've got Pierre-Luc Dubois, you've got Mark Scheifele. Like, this is your time. This year and next year are your time. And if you think your team is good enough, then you need to do what you need to do in order to augment it. Because, again, we've just touched on it. From a depth perspective, you need more than what you've got right now. So I think, look, Connor Hellebuyck is a great equalizer. We've seen it for the last 8 games. I mean, we've seen it all season. We've seen it in his career, but we've especially seen it with all the injuries and what he's been able to do. And so from that point of view, from my point of view, you've got to make a move. And I don't say it lightly because we know how talented this draft is. As it's always funny when scouts focus on drafts. And we remember when we were in Philadelphia at the Nick Ehlers draft, and we were taking the bus from the hotel to the draft at the arena. And I'll never forget it. The scouts were already talking about the 15 draft. And they're like, well, this guy's an A prospect. This guy, like they were already mindset focused on 15, not on 14. And again, similarly, we know how focused everybody is on the 23 draft. So,
and the scouts knew that the Jets were going to take Kyle Connor 17th overall. It was really weird how they knew that.
Well, it was weird. It was 2 Boston scouts. And they're like, well, we'd never take that Kyle Connor guy. He stinks.
It just seems, especially with the way the West is right now, because you can't tell me that there's one, every team in the West, if you say Vegas is the best team in the West, if you want to go with that, and I'm fine with that. You don't know what they have with Logan Thompson. He's never played a playoff game at the NHL level. So who knows what is going to happen in Vegas? Who knows what's going to happen? Dallas and Winnipeg. You can't tell me there's a lot of difference between those 2 teams. They both have, very good goaltenders, Hellebuyck and Ottinger. They both have very talented blue liners, Heiskanen and Morrissey. They both have very talented goal scorers in, Connor and Robertson. I mean, there's a lot, there's a lot of similarities between those 2 teams. And then, of course, you still have, the Colorado Avalanche, who everyone expects to make a push. The West is so wide open that there's no reason not to go for it this year. Last year, Colorado was so head and shoulders above everyone else that there wasn't be no reason to push your chips all in the middle last year. Colorado was the best team in the West. It was evident. This year, you tell me that one team is way better than another team in the West. I wouldn't agree with you, just simply because they are all so evenly matched. And that never mind some of the other teams that you are expecting to be up there that haven't had great seasons, the Calgarys, the Edmontons, the Colorados, Minnesota's sort of right on the cusp there. They have all the talent in the world with Kaprizov, of course. So this year seems to be the year to really make a splash if you're Kevin Cheveldayoff and you're the Winnipeg Jets. And I'd be of the opinion you're better off doing it sooner rather than waiting towards the deadline. Don't wait for the deadline, because at the deadline itself is when silly things happen. That's when Ben Sherratt gets a first-round pick, things of that nature. And then, no offense to Sherratt, of course, but I mean, that looked bad in hindsight. I mean, it looked bad when it happened based on his analytical numbers, but it looks even worse. If you're the Jets and there's an opportunity to strike early, because as I think Pierre LeBrun referenced in The Athletic or on TSN, look, all these teams that just watched Connor Bedard, perform magically at the World Juniors, those teams want to get worse earlier. They don't want to, if they're in that running, they don't want to be, bad. They don't want to be mediocre up until the trade deadline and then get bad. They want to be bad tomorrow so that they can get better odds.
You're 100% right, Drew. And it's not just so you're in the Connor Bedard sweepstakes. It's because you also want to be just generally a bottom 5, bottom 17 because of the other players that are really good, right? Like Dave mentioned it, like the scouts know what they're doing. These guys are full-time. I mean, they know their prospects much better than we do. Do they get things wrong? Of course. That's why Corey Pryman of The Athletic always comes out with, he redrafts. He goes, what did I get wrong a year later, right? And he admits it. So it's not an exact science, but I mean, when you consider a guy like Adam Fantilli, who you just saw play for Canada at the World Juniors, he's having an incredible year for the University of Michigan, right? He's expected to go second or third overall after Bedard, who everybody knows it's not going to be like last year, boys, when we had Huss on and we thought Shane Wright was going to go either first or second overall, and then he ends up going 4th overall. I mean, Bedard, you can already pencil him in as first overall. We just don't know what team. But a guy like Zach Benson,
in for
we've
the
talked
Calder
about him.
Trophy next year already.
Right, but in Vancouver, I know they've been talking about a guy like Zach Benson because he's from BC, plays for the Ice. He's a guy that's expected to go, somewhere, in the top 10, could be as high as, 4th or 5th overall. He's an excellent player. So it's that you want to be ideally in a position, to get Connor Bedard, but only one team's going to get Bedard, right? So like if you are, if you end up finishing 25th or 26th in the league, your chances of getting Bedard aren't very good, right? It's going to go to, the chances are much better for the 31st or 32nd team. So you're talking about the Blackhawks, you're talking about the Blue Jackets. So I think this year it's similar to 2015 in that there is going to be really good players drafted, in the mid first round. So, it's a huge draft year, and you're right. I think the Jets, would be well advised to, get in on the trade market a little bit early if possible. But I go back to Drew. I think, it comes back to, the window, we're towards the end of the window for this team. It's not like 2018-19, when you had, Scheifele locked up for, 4 or 5 more years and Hellebuyck locked up for 4 or 5 more years. I mean, we just don't know. I think there's a good chance Hellebuyck stays. But when it comes to Scheifele and Dubois, I mean, look, Scheifele could sign another long-term deal with the Jets. I'm not saying that's out of the realm of possibility. But I think, it's very unlikely that all 3 of Scheifele, Dubois, and Hellebuyck sign long-term with the Jets, because simply the Jets aren't going to be able to afford all 3.
And all indications, of course, still from Pierre-Luc Dubois and his uncertainty of his future is that, he seems to have his heart set on going to Montreal. And when he's a free agent, that's all the power to him for doing that. I mean, the way this season has turned, I would end up actually signing a contract extension when he's eligible to do so, next off season. I think, usually don't the Jets, like that's what they did with Wheeler, sort of a year out before his current contract expired. He signed that extension right as training camp was going to begin. And the way Scheifele's year has occurred and the bounce back and the buy-in that you're seeing, I would not be surprised to see something similar happen to him next September. But we're a long ways off from that. But because they're in, absolutely, as to your point, they are most definitely in win now mode because they have this year and potentially next year with Dubois, with Hellebuyck, under contract without needing an extension or anything else. So this is the time where you need to strike if you're going to do it. And the way they've started the year, while battling through a litany of injuries, is reason enough to believe that they're going to make a big splash, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I advocated earlier. I think that there's no reason not to. I mean, at a certain point, you have to be willing to go for it. You have to be willing to say, this is what our team is. This is what we've got. And I think if you're a Jets team and they, for all indications are they're thinking that way, then you have to think that, this is, as he's right, it's not 4 or 5 years ago. This is Blake Wheeler's got that window. Blake Wheeler's having a pretty good season, again, obviously he's, not injury notwithstanding, but this is probably your year to do it. Now, could you do it? And if you realize you're not going to get all these guys back, make some radical changes next year and, get back all of the capital that you've lost. Sure. It's a chance. You have to be willing to take risks, right? Like I can understand being risk averse, but at a certain point in the NHL, if you just want to be middling or you want to be in the middle, you can do that and you can have success, but you're not necessarily going to win the Stanley Cup. And ultimately the reason why these guys put on a jersey and they play the game, get paid millions of dollars, but also because they want to get they want to have a pretty good chance of winning a Stanley Cup. And that's every guy's dream. It's every kid's dream, growing up playing on the backyard rink is to win the Stanley Cup. So you're not sitting there going, we hope we win the Connor Bedard sweepstakes. Maybe as a GM you are, but none of the players are. All the players are focused on winning that cup. And to do so, you have to have depth. And the Jets have depth from a defensive perspective. Not a concern. I know some people want the Jets to get Jacob Chychrun, and I can understand that. And I'm not suggesting that he wouldn't help this team. I think he would, because obviously, even though he's a left shot, plays on the right side. I just think that's one of those things the Jets have to factor in. But, of course, let's get to the next segment.
There's going to be a few teams that are after Jacob Chychrun. I think that's going to be the issue. If the Jets are at all interested, Dave, it's that I think you're going to have to pay a pretty big price to get Jacob Chychrun.
There's no question you will. Let's talk about the Buffalo Sabres and everything going on throughout the NHL with our very good friend Marty Biron joining us on the program. Marty, great to see you this morning. How are things? Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year. I was just asking this morning. Minnesota's in Buffalo, so I saw some of their trainers and people I like to see once a year in Buffalo, and I said Happy New Year. And then I was like, is it too late to wish somebody a Happy New Year? Like a week? Is it too late? But Happy New Year to you guys as well.
I would say, Marty, like 2 weeks. I think 2 weeks.
2 weeks, okay.
If you're wishing somebody a Happy New Year on like January 25th, I think that's too late. But I think the first couple weeks you're good.
I always say, like, is your Christmas decoration still up? If they are still up, you can wish people Happy New Year. So that's good.
It's funny you mentioned that. My wife and kids are taking ours down right now because I think they wait. My wife says she waits till Epiphany happens, and I'm not really sure what Epiphany is. The good folks in the chat will let me know, but you're asking three Jewish guys what Epiphany is. I'm out of my element in that front, Marty. But my wife and kids are taking the Christmas decorations down. So today is the last day I can say Happy New Year. So I'll sneak it under the wire for you.
I like
Marty,
it. That's good. And you guys must be feeling pretty good with
Yeah.
the way the Jets played last night and everybody coming back into the lineup. So that was pretty special to see. A big win against Tampa for sure.
I thought the best part was the intermission analysis. That was my favorite part, actually. I got to say, Marty.
Well, you know, when we brought up the old Ron Tugnut video from his 1991 performance of 70 saves against Ray Bourque, Cam Neely, and the Boston Bruins in the old Boston Garden, I thought that was my best segment because I didn't have to say much. Just let the video roll, and it was perfect.
Well, let's talk about that briefly, even though we're going to talk about the Jets and we're going to talk about the Sabres. But, you know, UC Saros and the performance that he put on earlier this week, you know, when you're a goalie and you're sort of in the zone like that, how does it feel? Like what is going through your mind when the puck seems as big as a beach ball, to use that old euphemism?
Yeah, it feels great. Although you don't want to face 67 shots in the game because the odds that 1 or 2 or 3, 4, 5, 6 are going to go in is greater, but you definitely get on a roll. And the way that Saros' performance was, so he faced 28 shots in the third period alone. So I look at around the National Hockey League, like 28 shots is sometimes a game. Right? He faced that in the third period alone. So it wasn't like a heavy load in the first and then not much in the second and third. It kind of built. First period, I think, was 15. Second period was 20-something. Third period was 28. So it built up, right? And I think that's why, like, as a goaltender, you start to get into a rhythm. And at that point in the third period, you're like, you're not scoring. I'm making the saves. And he made a couple of beauties on Svechnikov. Saros is so athletic, too, so it works out for him. But so I did some work because I was working the Jets game last night, and I'm like, I wonder what's the most saves Connor Hellebuck's had in the game. 51. 51 is the most save Connor Hellebuck had in the game. I'm like, that's still 13 away from UC Saros. That's a period away, right? The most I made in the game was 48, I think. I'm like, I'm 16 saves away from UC Saros. Like, that is a ton of shots and saves that Saros had.
You know, Marty, let's talk about the Jets a bit, and then we'll get into the Sabres. But they play each other, I think, twice in the next almost 2 or 3 weeks. Obviously, next week in Buffalo, and then the return engagement in Winnipeg. You know, this Jets team has obviously performed tremendously well this season, record-wise, certainly, and even on the ice. You know, without a lot of guys in their lineup. And then last night they got the 4 guys who step right back in. You know, what does that do to a dressing room when, you know, Raiders get back into the game and into the lineup when a team has been performing so well? Is that like an energy boost in the dressing room, or is there sort of a little bit of uncertainty how the new fit is going to sort of come back to fruition?
It always depends. If they're new guys that are coming in from trades or call-ups, then there's a little bit of uncertainty. But when you're getting Perfetti, Wheeler, you're getting Schmidt, and you're getting Ehlers back, like, you know what these guys are going to do. So it's a clear emotional boost, the energy boost that you're going to get. Now, you have to understand that they're not going to be mid-season form, especially Ehlers, who's missed like 36 games. And there's a lot of players that miss legitimate time, like even missing 9 games. 9 games is almost a month, right? So, you know, for Wheeler and for Schmidt, I think that missed 9 games. That is going to take some time. And you saw it in the first period and maybe even the first 2 periods. Those players, not that they struggled, but it wasn't the same level at 5-on-5. Like you put them on the power play, especially on the 5-on-3, they're going to snap the puck around. They're going to move it better because they have the time to think. At 5-on-5, they didn't really have the time to think. So it's going to take some time. And Ehlers said it after the first period to John New. I think he's like, oh, that was awful first period. I felt awful. It was brutal. But so you're going to get that. But the energy boost throughout the lineup was there. Man, how good is Josh Morrissey? I know every time I come on this show, I talk about Josh Morrissey. But even last night, like the second period starts and the Jets are not playing well, although they're tied 1-1. And then who gets a 2-on-1 and does the toe drag? Vasilevsky made a nice save. It's Josh Morrissey. Who takes ownership on the 5-on-3? It's Josh Morrissey. Like he's just, what did he have? 3 points last night again. Like this is just amazing from their all-star on the blue line.
Okay, Marty, we got to talk about the Buffalo Sabres, of course, and the Jets play them later next week. And we're going to talk about Tage Thompson, but I did a little bit of research, and Lance Lasowski of the Buffalo News wrote about this. So this comes from his numbers, but we're talking obviously about Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. We're talking about Eric Comrie, who we should mention is on a conditioning stint right now with the Rochester Americans. He's been out since, I believe, around mid-November, so they're going to have to make a decision. And you can speak to it more because I believe the Sabres are talking about going with 3 goaltenders on their 22-man roster, which, as you know, is not the most common. But if you were to look at Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen's numbers, you'd say, okay, he's got 8 wins, .904 save percentage, 3.24 goals against. But, and this is thanks to Lance Lasowski here, in his past 5 starts, UPL has a .925 save percentage, all 5 wins, and he ranks 4th in the NHL since mid-December in goals saved above expectation. So, as you know, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen is playing really well. Some Jets fans might not know that, but I guess what has impressed you the most about UPL, and what do you see the Sabres doing once Eric Comrie is ready to return?
So Luukkonen is a tall goaltender, very athletic, very good down low, great post plays, great lateral movement and agility. I feel that sometimes he has a tougher time tracking the puck from out far. And even though he's big, he plays low. He hunches over and he plays low. So when there's a screen, I feel like he has a tough time battling through it, but he's gotten better. And that's what you want to see, right? You can do it at the AHL level, and all of a sudden you're at the NHL level and you're like, man, the game is going so fast and the screens are very in the way, and I can't see the puck as well. And I think every step the way it's been better. So he's been really good. And Craig Anderson has been really good. Both goaltenders in the last month have got very similar numbers when you look at goals saved above expectations. So they've both been good. Eric Comrie was really good early in the year. And then, unfortunately for him, the Sabres lost 8 in a row because they were missing a lot of defensemen. And it affected Comrie's game. He kept getting lit up for 5 goals, 6 goals, 5 goals. Not his fault. And then he got hurt. So he played last night in a conditioning stint, his 3rd game in Rochester. I would think that's going to be it. He'll probably rejoin the Sabres shortly here. And I never like having 3 goalies. Having 3 goalies is the worst. There's 2 nets on the ice for practice. Both goalies want their own net. They want their work, right? But the situation in Buffalo is that Craig Anderson's 41 years old. He doesn't always practice anyway. And when he does, it is being managed. So you could have 3 goalies and basically have Anderson kind of, I don't want to say push to the side, but just understand the situation that they're looking at the future. They're looking at Luukkonen. How can we continue to develop him? Early in the season, the best place for him to develop was in the AHL. Now it's the NHL. And Eric Comrie needs to play at the NHL level. So how do we move forward with Comrie and Luukkonen? So I think for the short term, they'll probably carry 3 goalies. That means they're going to have to make a move on the roster. Maybe it is Casey Fitzgerald gets put on waivers and sent back to Rochester. And then when Henry Jokiharju comes back, it's going to have to be another one. So that's going to complicate things. But in the short term, I believe they're going to keep 3 and give Luukkonen and Comrie a chance to continue their development. And that may put Craig Anderson on the side a little bit, but they're not trading Craig Anderson. They're not waiving him. They're not like cutting him loose. Like they're not going to do any of that. They respect him, and he still has a big part to play in the organization.
Saturday morning, you're watching the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're live on YouTube. Marty B. Ron, analyst on TSN, RDS, and MSG, is our guest, talking about the Buffalo Sabres and everything in the NHL. The Jets into Buffalo next week to face the Sabres.
Well, Marty, when Tage Thompson signed his 7-year extension back in August, a lot of people made fun of GM Kevin Adams and saying, well, you know, he has I think a 38 goal season last year. So you're thinking, well, is it putting the cart before the horse? Are you trusting this guy too much? Well, that contract looks like it's a bargain right now, given he has 30 goals already this season. So what are you seeing from Tage Thompson? Because he wasn't really on the radar, maybe for a lot of people who don't follow the Buffalo Sabres, but that's going to change after this season.
That changed a little bit last year. You said 38 goals, and most of his production was in the second half, I would say, when Alex Tuch was healthy enough and joined that line. So it was Jeff Skinner, Tage Thompson, and Alex Tuch. And this season, they started without Tuch on their line, and Don Granato quickly said, you know what, I got to put Tuch on that line. And then Tage Thompson, after a slow start, really took off. I remember the game against Chicago at the end of October. I think that was October 29th, where I asked Don Granato that morning, I said, is Tage putting too much pressure on himself? And Don says, I talked to him. He wants to score every game. He wants to be one of the best players in the NHL. He wants to be midseason form, and we're only 6 games in. He needs more time to get there. Well, that night against Chicago, he scored 2, and then it just, the next game against Detroit, I think he had a 6-point night. It's just been like crazy for Tage Thompson. But you're right. It took him a little longer. Number one, he was drafted by St. Louis, was traded in the Ryan O'Reilly trade, came to Buffalo, played a little bit, then went back to Rochester, got called up to Buffalo, separated his shoulder, needed shoulder surgery, missed the rest of the year. There was the COVID year where, he was taxi squad for a little bit and then in and out of the lineup. So there was a lot that went in the way of his development. And last year when Don Granato moved Tage Thompson to the middle and said, you know what, I think we got to play him center. I think that he's being restricted on the wall. He's 6'7". I know he's listed at 6'6", but when a guy has to dip down before coming into the locker room, he's 6'7" in my books, right? With his skates too, it's probably 6'9" on skates. So being restricted with the wall, being restricted in space on the ice, put him in the middle and open up that ice. It really unblocked his potential. So and he just can shoot the puck. He'll go to the All-Star game. I can't wait to see him in the hardest shot competition, because this season alone, and this is numbers from like a month ago, there was 17 shots that were recorded over 100 miles an hour in the NHL for the first 2 months of the season. Tage Thompson had 6 of them. 6 out of the 17 shots recorded over 100 miles an hour, they were Tage Thompson's, right? So, I can't wait to see what he does at the All-Star skills competition, the hardest shot, but that's what he does. He has skills. He has the shot. He has the reach, the size, the strength. He's pretty special.
Marty, when you look at this Buffalo Sabres team, I mean, they're not in a playoff spot right now. 19-5-2 on the season. Good record, especially given the last decade of lean years in Buffalo. Goal differential of +21, which is very impressive. Is this a better team than their record indicates, or than people are necessarily maybe giving them credit for at this point in the year?
No, I think if you look at the betting line at the start of the season for the Sabres, the over-under on points for the year was set at 80.5. So that's basically Vegas had the Sabres at a 500 hockey team, right? They may get between 78 and 82 points or whatnot. So then they did have an 8-game losing streak, which really set them back. But they are where I think they were going to be. So you have the top 3 in the Atlantic: Boston, Toronto, Tampa. And then I had Buffalo, Detroit, and Ottawa in a group that was going to compete for that 4th place in the Atlantic division, and maybe for a wild card spot. So the point total at the end of the year doesn't really matter to me. Is where do you fit yourself in the Atlantic division in the Eastern Conference? So to me, Detroit is a team that made a lot of moves last year, and they're trying to get forward. Ottawa is the same way. The Sabres are the same way. So how do you compare yourself in the development of these other teams? And I think they're ahead. I think they're ahead of these other teams. Now, they did beat Boston. You know, it was in overtime, but that's a big win against Boston. They beat Washington. Well, that was a big win against the Washington Capitals as well. Two of the hottest team now. So they've been able to respond. Earlier in the season, they had lost to Tampa. They had lost to Boston. They had lost to a bunch of those teams. So they're flipping it around right now, which was good for the Sabres.
Now, Marty, I have to ask you about Owen Power because I'll admit I haven't watched, certainly have not watched the Sabres as much as you have, but I've only watched them a little bit. I know he's still looking for his first goal, his first NHL season. But, I mean, you look at the Sabres back end, obviously led by Rasmus Dahlin, but it's very young. And you mentioned earlier Henry Jokiharju, he's going to come back eventually. But, you know, it's a very young defense. And I just wanted to ask you, you know, how you would assess his first half of his season. As we mentioned, this is his first NHL season. The sky's the limit. I think you'd agree for Owen Power, but kind of what would be your kind of macro level assessment of his game so far?
He's been excellent. And yes, he hasn't scored this year. He did get a couple of goals last year when he finished his season at Michigan and joined the Sabres for the end of the season. But he has been logging in some major time. So the top four for the Sabres when you started the season was Dahlin and Matthias Samuelsson, Owen Power, and Henry Jokiharju. Now, there's been some injuries, and they've had to rely heavily on Dahlin and Power and with Samuelsson. Those guys are in the top 40, I believe, in ice time in the National Hockey League. I think there's only two teams that have three defensemen in the top 40 in ice time. So they've relied on Power, Samuelsson, Dahlin. Now, Kale Clegg is now playing with Power. And Kale Clegg's a guy that people are going to say, who? Like, he was through the Montreal organization. He was in Rochester this year, got called up because Power got hurt in Colorado in the pregame warmup. And Clegg has been fantastic. So they really rely on their top three, top four. And Power has been great. The offense hasn't been there all that much, but the ice time, just last game, against Washington in the first period, he played 7 minutes and 45 seconds. It was most amongst defensemen, I believe. And when you multiply that by three, that's another 23-minute night, right? I mean, that is a lot of minutes for a first-year NHL defenseman.
Marty, got to ask you about the World Juniors because that was some fantastic hockey. Now, as a goaltender, I'm not so certain you're going to want to break down the American and Swedish game because that was, after shocking to think that it was a 1-0 game after 20 and somehow ended up 8-7 in overtime. But the Canada and Czechia game was phenomenal, gold for the gold medal. And what were your overall thoughts about the World Juniors?
I thought it was great. First of all, Moncton, Halifax, they did a fantastic job hosting the event. The buzz was there, and every single game. I mean, I watched Latvia, Austria, and the Austrians scored, and the building erupted, right? And it was like, they're into it. So that was fun. I always love playing junior hockey down the Maritimes, and they really showed up, and it was great. The Canada-USA semifinal games was awesome. Again, I think USA they got screwed on the first goaltender interference call, but the second one was definitely a no goal. But I thought the first one should have counted. But it was great hockey. And the finals between Canada and Czechia, I thought Canada had it in the bag. It's 2-0. They seem on cruise control. Czechia did that to Sweden in the semifinal where they scored in the last minute and scored in OT. So then they get 2 goals, right? Mm-hmm. 2 goals to tie it. And so it had me on the edge of my seat. I felt bad for Yuri Kulik, who's a Czechia player that plays with the Rochester Americans. He's a first-round pick of the Sabres last draft in Montreal. He's the one that lost the puck on entry, and then Canada goes down the other way and scores the game winner. And I saw Yuri after the game on TV, and he's crying. And I'm like, this is just heartbreaking because for Czechia, it was huge. This is a tournament where Russia wasn't there. Czechia played great. Slovakia played great. Sweden and Finland are always good. I felt like we now have more than just the top 2, top 3 in the world at the junior level. We had great competitive balance, and it was a fun tournament to watch.
Marty, last question for you. Going back to the Sabres, I was reading an article not that long ago towards the beginning of the year that talked about the Sabres power play struggles. Well, fast forward a few months later, they're now the second best power play in the league, just trailing the juggernaut Oilers. what has changed from the beginning of the season to now, and what are the Sabres doing that's so effective on that power play?
They've got their spots. I mean, you have Tage Thompson on the left. That is the one-timer threat like Ovechkin, like Stamkos can be. On the right side, on the right flank, you have Dylan Cousins, who's been really good. He's a righty, so he's not a one-timer shot, but he likes to do the candy cane. He comes out of the zone like Patrick Kane would do on the other side and then gets it. And then he opens up to either Alex Tuch or Jeff Skinner, and there's a bumper position. And obviously you got Rasmus Dahlin at that blue line, right? And he's such a good facilitator. Like Dahlin, to me, kind of like Josh Morrissey, reads the defense. He's like a quarterback that understands that if he goes 5 feet to the right, everybody's going to switch over, and then boom, you hit Thompson with the pass. Or you go the other way, and then they still cheat on Thompson. You have a shot lane to the net. Like Dahlin has been so good. But their offense, ultimately the Sabres offense, they're number one in the league in goals per game. And they're over 4 a game now. I mean, that's pretty significant. So to be able to score 4 goals on average, that's going to put your power play on a very good light as well.
Marty Biron covers the Buffalo Sabres for MSG. You also see him, of course, on Jets broadcast here with his work for TSN.
Marty, just before we let you go, I wanted to mention this. I don't know if you can see this in the chat. Matt Robichaud wrote, I actually used to root for Buffalo growing up just because of Marty Biron. So I thought that was pretty awesome.
Oh, thanks, Matt. I appreciate it. I would have thought maybe he was cheering for Hasek or Miller or something like that. But, and by the way, for, the hockey fans and the goalie fans, Ryan Miller's Sabres Hall of Fame induction and jersey retirement ceremony is next week on the 19th, I think maybe in 2 weeks. And so if you're a big, hockey fan, a big goalie fan, that's going to be a special night here in Buffalo when Ryan Miller's jersey goes right next to Dominic Hasek and Rick Jeanneret and LaFontaine and Danny Gare and Tim Horton and the French Connection. So it's pretty special.
That'll be a great night in Buffalo for that. And the Jets will be in Buffalo next week to face the Sabres. Marty, thanks so much for this. We always appreciate catching up with you. Have a great weekend.
You guys have a good
Happy New Year,
Year
Marty.
as well. Happy New Year.
Thanks, Marty.
Take care. There he goes. Marty Biron joining us on the program. We take our final week and come back and wrap this morning's show. Stay tuned. It's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show live on YouTube and all of our social media platforms. A couple minutes before the top of the hour. Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Drew Mandel, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg with you on this Saturday morning. Big thanks to Jason Bell. Big thanks to Marty Biron for joining us. Great insight from both of them. In case you missed any of the show, the immediate replay here on our YouTube channel, and of course the podcast, Dave M will have that up and ready for you ASAP. As always, we ask you to smash the like button, subscribe to the YouTube channel, subscribe to the podcast page, leave us feedback on the podcast page, and the iTunes allows for comments, so leave us some comments there as well. We always appreciate hearing from our loyal audience. Reminder, the Illegal Curve post-game show, that'll come your way tomorrow afternoon right around 4:45 p.m. Myself and Dave Minuk will bring you everything that had to do with the Jets and the Canucks. I understand that Ezzy's still going to be recuperating at that point in time. Maybe is it going to be ice packs at that point, or still maybe frozen peas, or is it still going to be the same bag of corn there?
No. I think I'm going to switch it up. I also have an ice pack at home. So, yeah, I'm just going to keep it nice and cool, keep my boys nice and cool.
That's good.
But I think by the time, tomorrow rolls around, I should be much better. I don't think I have to, worry about that. They say 48 hours. So, me and my new boys, we're going to be ready to go.
Now, your boys were commented on as being, quote, by Dr. J as, quote, very tight. Do you know what that means? Because I have no idea what that means, and it sounds very painful.
Well, yeah, you want to. I guess that's how we're gonna end with a bang, as they say, right, Drew? Well, I mean, like you had the procedure, so you're sitting there. I mean, you're numb, right? They give you.
I was not said that anything was tight. There was no tightness.
Well, the thing is, first off, I can't feel it down there, and he's the doctor. He's the one who's like, in my mind, I kind of know what he's doing, but I'm not really I don't know what he's exactly doing. There's incisions and tubes are being tied, and I have no idea. But when he said that the first time, I was like, okay. And then I felt something like, he was doing something down there. And then he mentioned again that it was pretty tight down there. So I asked him, like, is that common that, people get tight? And he said, not really. So that kind of, it's like when you go to see a dermatologist and you show them, like, you show them something and they say, I've never seen that before, right? Like, you never want to hear that from a dermatologist because you assume a dermatologist has seen literally everything when it comes to the skin, right? So yeah, he said I was a little bit tight. So I think it took a little bit longer. It must just be, because I'm so physically fit that's why I'm tight in that area. But as I mentioned, shout out to Dr. Jay Buenafé. If you're thinking about, getting the procedure done, it really is, it doesn't take that long, and it's a few days of having some, frozen peas on your balls. So it's really not that bad.
And plus, we don't have to worry about any more Ginsburgs being brought into the world. So us around us can take a deep sigh of relief in that case, right, Dave?
Well, this has been something, all right.
Dave hasn't been through this, folks, so Dave doesn't know what Ezzy and I are talking about. So maybe one day that'll happen to Mr. Manuk, and
not a chance.
And they can be not a chance. Dave's staying fully intact.
Dave's going to be a free agent forever.
Yeah, exactly.
He needs to.
My boys can swim. My boys can swim.
Exactly. You need to perform at peak Manuk at all times, is clearly what we're learning about here today. But there is no better way to wrap up this show.
I think one thing I learned that I didn't know before is that sperm and semen are actually two different things.
Well, welcome to grade 9 science class there, Ginsburg.
As he got kicked out of that.
I bet you, and I'm sure Ezzy's still trying to figure out how to put the condom on the banana.
I used to just go to cooking class. I did cooking class basically the entire day. I just skipped everything else and just kept going back to cooking.
Very important, and clearly that's where your expertise lies, on the food realm of things, so on the sexual reproductive health side of things. That's it for this morning. Like I said, we'll be back tomorrow, Dave, M, and I, 4:45 with the Illegal Curve post-game show following the Jets and the Canucks. IllegalCurve.com. The Jets are going to practice in about an hour, so IllegalCurve.com will have all the latest news from the Winnipeg Jets practice. Want to say a big thank you to all the sponsors of Illegal Curve who make the Saturday show, the post-game show, the website a possibility. Our friends at Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club, Linden Market Dental Center, Zappia Group Realty, Betway, Tough Duck, Boston Pizza, Seagram's, Rolly's Transfer, Grid Park, and The Keg. Support these fine businesses because of their continued support of Illegal Curve Hockey.
I agree with Tracy, by the way. By the way, for the folks who are listening to the podcast, Tracy L just wrote, I'm really missing the limitations of the show being on terrestrial radio right about now. I agree with Tracy. I wish this is the one time I'm like, why are we not stuck with terrestrial radio? Come on.
And I saw a few minutes ago, before we wrap up here, Kyle was asking, did I buy the premium package or take the needle method? Because you can pay for the premium package, but I can't afford that. So I just went with
What the hell's the difference between what does that mean? He uses gloves or doesn't use gloves?
No. I made sure that he double bagged it. So he wore Dr. J was wearing gloves for Big Daddy's
ironic, Ezzy, that he double bagged it and you'll never have to bag it again.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I just thought it was also funny that on January 6th, 2021.
I'm out of here. I'll see ya.
January 6th, 2021, there was an insurrection on the Capitol. And January 26, 2023, there was no erection for this guy. So
could have left my joke be the last one.
Goodbye, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow. Our apologies for the last segment. Drew Mandel, Dave Manuk, Ezra Ginsburg. If it's Saturday, it's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
Thanks for listening to this broadcast from Illegal Curve Hockey. For more great Illegal Curve content, subscribe to the Illegal Curve YouTube channel, follow at Illegal Curve on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and visit your online home for hockey in Winnipeg, illegalcurve.com.